What is up? Happy Friday or Saturday or Sunday morning or whatever day you watch this. Welcome to the Week 12 edition of the DFS Academy Club Fantasy's DFS show. We're going to break down the main slate for you guys, and Week 12 is a bit of a weird one. It's more specifically for redraft fantasy football. There are 6 teams on bye right now as people are fighting for the playoffs. And while that is maddening for redraft, it gives you the ability to make some really interesting lineup decisions in DFS. Let's see what we can cook up. What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, happy Thursday night. It's the Browns and the Steelers playing right now. I think the first game with snow this season. It's a little bit. It's not a lot, but the first game with snow this season. And I mentioned Austin in the pregame. It's the first time I think they've been halfway through the second quarter when we started an episode of this, because as you pointed out, they're running and punting. That's all they're doing right now. So
yeah, it's arguable that there's a football game happening right now. I mean, there's a lot of pushing and shoving happening on the field. I don't know that there's a lot of football action happening.
yeah, Browns Steelers, whenever one of the teams are basically eliminated like the Browns are right now, it can get chippy too. So this might actually be a quite entertaining game in the fourth quarter. We could see people hit in the face with helmets, though that guy doesn't play for the Steelers anymore. So I don't know how that's all going to go down, but it should be real interesting. Austin, it is a bipocalypse and probably the worst time of the year for redraft players. 6 teams on bye, but not just 6 teams. We're talking some of the best players in fantasy football not available. Specifically off the top of my head, the Bills and the Bengals. And obviously there are 4 more teams that I'm forgetting that probably have really good players too. But like, you're losing Josh Allen, you're losing Joe Burrow. You're losing a lot of really important players. DFS might be the respite for a lot of people this week.
Yeah, well, not only that, but Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are playing this week, but not in the main slate. So you don't get Lamar Jackson. Jaden Daniels is the most expensive quarterback on the slate this week, which tells you, I mean, he's good. He's been great for fantasy, don't get me wrong. But it tells you the situation that we're dealing with teams on bye and good teams having primetime matchups.
That's a really good point. Justin Herbert's come on lately. Quentin Johnston, all of a sudden, Quentin Johnston might be a DFS darling this week, if not for him being in the Monday night game. So, yeah, a lot of interesting schedule decisions for the NFL. The 6 buys in week 12. I knew it was going to be ugly when I was drafting earlier in the season, specifically with my best ball leagues. I don't think I knew it was going to be this bad, where the amount of pictures out there of teams whose entire bench is on bye this week. They have no lineup decisions to make because they can't put anybody from their bench in. So, and then we get everybody back in week 13 before another week 14 bye with some good teams. But enough about redraft woes. As I mentioned, Austin, DFS is going to be the respite. And the DFS Academy is here to help you build some main slate rosters. If you've never tuned in before, we're going to start by talking about cash games. We're going to help you build your bankroll. We're going to talk to you about some of the safer plays in fantasy football this week, heading into week 12 for the main slate. And then we're going to get into tournament play, because I like to throw $20 at DraftKings every week to try to make $1 million. Never come close, but we're still going to talk about it. And we actually start with that. We call it answers to the test. We take a look at last week's Millionaire Maker lineup and see what we got right, what we got wrong, what we didn't understand about it. And Austin, over the last couple of weeks, we have done a really, really good job of naming players on this show that ended up in the Milli Maker lineup. But we were very clearly not enough in on that Detroit matchup last week, because we only named one player, and it was you, by the way. So Jared Goff, Audric Estime, which Estime made sense. He would almost felt too chalky. But what's funny is he did terrible. So that was probably the worst part of this guy's entire lineup. Breece Hall, Devon Achane, your call, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Kendrick Bourne, Taysom Hill, obviously, and the Miami defense. So the 2 things that jumped out to me on this, Austin, are the triple stack from that Jared Goff game. I've kind of stayed away from starting a quarterback in 2 of his wide receivers. It worked out well for this person. And then this is the one I kind of wanted to ask you about. bringing in the second level of game theory and going with the running back and his defense to see how that shook out for everyone. Obviously, for this person, it worked out really well, even with Audric Estime doing next to nothing.
Yeah, and I mean the double stack thing, it is a good strategy that I will go after sometimes. It's just like the idea there is if the team is doing well, if they're rolling, then there's a good chance that multiple pass catchers are able to get there. It's not often that you're able to get both the wide receiver one and the wide receiver two in a lineup, which explains also part of what was happening here with the rest of the team. Like Audric Estime, that's essentially a salary move at this point for this roster because Amon-Ra was 8K, Jameson Williams was 58. Like that's still above the average salary per player that you can fit in your lineup. To your point, the Devon Achane Miami defense correlation, that's actually a really common strategy, or maybe not common, but a good strategy. And it's, I would say like one of the best practices is like if you have a running back that you think is going to roll because they're playing ahead, correlating them with the defense makes a ton of sense because of the game script correlation that can happen there. So I really like that move. The one that just comes out of nowhere is Taysom Hill. Like that's the thing is like I think this is going to be the year where I stop being biased against Taysom Hill the way I have been. And I'm like, you know what? There are going to be times where I need to play him. I contemplated him as in cash last week because I was like, they don't have receivers. He's been getting the running back role.
And I think, Jamal Williams was out last week or something like that.
Jamal Williams was out. And I considered it as I was going through my process, but I thought, no, I can't do that. I can't do that with Taysom Hill. He does this. He tricks me all the time. He'll be like 1 week, 30 points, and then do nothing the rest of the season. Well, he stayed involved. And, some of that was fluky. Some of that was explosive plays. And I didn't watch the tape. So like it could have been busted plays, whatever on defense.
Terrible tackling by the Browns. They were attempting to throw shoulders at him because you think you can do that for a quarterback, and that's just not what happened. This is my third show this week, and I think I've addressed the Taysom Hill thing on every show. My biggest issue with Taysom Hill is that he's not a tight end. It's the tight end eligibility that gets me. If they called this kid a running back, it would make so much more sense. I wouldn't be mad about it. Taysom Hill essentially changed fantasy football last week. He was the number 1 rated quarterback last week. He beat that 404 Bills from Jared Goff in fantasy because of everything else he did. But what I did like to see from him, Austin, finally last week, he caught 8 balls for 50 yards, like both were career highs. So at least he did some tight end-esque things, though he's the only tight end in the world who can score 3 touchdowns. So just what an incredible match for Taysom Hill. And then he goes on bye. So at least all we got to do is cry about it this week. We don't have to worry about playing it this week. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the funny thing, I mentioned this on the Thursday Night Showdown Slate show with Josh, the Cleveland Browns now, because of them getting beat up by Taysom Hill, they have allowed the second most points, which, by the way, it's wild that this still is just the second most points to the tight end position since week 8. They've averaged 33.5 points to the tight end position now over their past 3 games. And it's mostly because of the fact that Taysom Hill just absolutely went berserk.
How incredible is that? What a great point that the Browns and probably the Panthers and Falcons are all broken in their tight end scoring because of what Taysom Hill did to them. Because I believe those were his three big games this season. What an incredible, now I want to dig more into that. That's super interesting. That's not what we're going to do. We are going to get into cash plays, Austin, because that is what you do. And folks, I always like to now start this with a couple of disclaimers. We do this show because we want to see you guys do really, really well. Thursday information is not always the best information. So we record this on Thursday night. Austin drops an article every single Saturday. Sometimes he talks about the same players he talks about on the show. Other times, because better things have happened later on in the week, he talks about better players. So if you're tuning into this, we love you. We appreciate you. But make sure you're reading his article too, because things change and Austin's on top of it. He gets to see the Friday injury report. Make sure you're paying attention to that article. But Austin, let's kick the show off with top of the class. This is your favorite high-priced player of the week. We're talking 8K and above. Who are we looking at this week?
Yeah, so we're going to go with Joe Mixon. I'm going to say this up front. You can play Christian McCaffrey as well, and there's even ways for you to play both of these guys, which we'll get to later. But I'm picking Joe Mixon just because I want to highlight the role that he has in this offense. He is consistently getting 20 touches. He's scoring a ton of touchdowns. Like, he is really the Houston Texans offense right now. That's how they want to be. And I think like in the offseason, especially for fantasy people, it was like, oh, 3 receivers, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins. It's going to be a pass-heavy offense. It was never designed to be that. This is a Shanahan-style offense. It was always meant to be run the ball and pass when you need to, run to pass the ball. And so Joe Mixon, it's going to flow through him. It's going to continue to do that. Even as the injuries have come through, he's still been able to get into the end zone and be pretty effective. He's $8K on DraftKings, $9,300 on FanDuel. So the pricing is pretty good too. Like, he's consistently gotten 20 plus points over and over again. He has like 2 games where he played the full game under 20 points, and they were like 17-point outings, which if that happens, I still feel really good about how he does.
Yeah, I was working on an article for Football Guys this week, and I pointed out that a lot of fanfare surrounded what Derrick Henry had done and is doing in Baltimore at this later stage of his career. What Joe Mixon's doing may be more noteworthy. I mean, he's not as old as Henry, but when Joe Mixon plays right now, he's the best running back in fantasy, plain and simple. Like, as you pointed out, he's the whole offense. And I like what you said. We overreacted to where they spent their money, and I feel like we do this so much. It's a Shanahan style offense. It's a defensive coordinator, head coach. Did you really think D'Amico Ryans was going to be like, yeah, kid, go throw the ball 45 times a game? No, I don't think we all saw. The thing that's been really striking to me with Joe Mixon and the Houston Texans is the Bengals have put so much time and effort into improving their offensive line, but they did it to protect Joe Burrow. And so we saw Joe Mixon get like 3.7 yards a carry and thought he was just done, and the Texans were just burning money. He's averaging like 5 yards a carry this season. Like, they have a line that's built to run block. The writing was on the wall for Joe Mixon to not be terrible, and now we're reaping the benefits.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the efficiency has been really good. And so even if he was doing 3 or 4 yards per carry with his volume, I'd still be interested in him, but the efficiency just makes it that much better.
Yeah, and I believe in games he's played, he's the RB1 in fantasy. Like, he's just been incredible. Moving on, Austin, I always get nervous. Nervous might be the right word. When one of your picks is a quarterback, is also my tournament pick, because it's like, did I go too chalky again? So I'm going to put you on the spot right away and ask, is this guy also tournament viable? We call it band nerds, folks. These are the $6,000 to $8,000 players. A little bit too much time practicing their instrument to be the top of the class, but still very viable plays, and hopefully viable in both forms for Bo Nix.
Yeah, so Bo Nix is one of my cash quarterback considerations of the year, or of the year. LOL. Actually, genuinely,
yes,
of the year, but also of the week. He's $6,300 on DraftKings, $8K on FanDuel. I will talk through a little bit of the process behind the scenes of what happened here. I did think, like, just go with Jalen Daniels. He's only $7K on DraftKings. Like, he can easily hit that. But then we'll get to this. I really want to play the running backs in that matchup, and I don't want to play Jaden Daniels and the running backs. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'll just spend down a little bit. Go to Bo Nix. He's been good, consistent, safe. Las Vegas has allowed the second most points to the quarterback position since week 8. They've been getting shredded, and Bo Nix just shredded the Falcons. To your question about, is he also GPP viable? I think so. Like, particularly with quarterbacks, like, even when they are chalky in tournaments, they usually aren't that chalky, and it's usually okay if they're chalky. Like, in tournaments, I could see him being like 15% rostered,
especially in a week like this where we're talking on the DraftKings main slate. There's only 20 teams playing. So
yeah, exactly. So he probably will be chalky, but there are other ways that you can get different with your lineup. We talk about this every week. I mean, the Milli Maker winning lineup last week had Devon Achane, who was 36% rostered. So it's okay to eat a little bit of chalk here and there. There are plenty of other ways to get different.
Yeah, I'll talk about it when we get to the tournament section, but your pick at quarterback, I was choosing between those two. And so I was like, oh, I see I was on the right path. I should have stolen from him, but we'll get to that here in about 15 minutes. But you have another pick from the same section, Austin.
Yeah, I do. I have Tyreek Hill, who is interesting. I just remember
last year. I just remember last year it was so expensive. We always had to talk about him in the first section, and this year I don't want to say the mighty have fallen because he's done what he can with some subpar QB play.
Yeah, well, and he had a decent week last week.
He
He
did.
got close to 20 points. I think he had like around 8 targets. So he's showing like he has the stealing there still, and he's still Tyreek Hill. Like he can break a 70-yard touchdown at any time. Miami's playing New England, and I think New England is getting a lot of name recognition still, which we'll talk about in the tournament section. In terms of like their defense, like when I think of a New England defense, I get like physical reactions to it. Like I'm afraid of that defense because
Yeah.
of historically how they've been, but they aren't really that this year. Like they are rebuilding. They traded away a lot of their defensive talent. They've been focusing on like what do we have in Drake May, and so I think this is a good spot for Tyreek Hill. And if he continues to get the volume, like it's going to be fine. This is actually also surprisingly one of the higher over unders on the slate. It's at 46 points, which is pushing like it's like weirdly average, but like a little bit above average for the week, like especially when you think about the fact that the game that's happening as we record this show has a 36.5 point over under. Like
Yeah.
these are two teams that kind of are middling or towards the bottom, but they're still like there's that potential high scoring aspect. And in particular, Miami has the fourth, is actually tied for the third highest implied team total on the slate. So that also bodes well for Tyreek Hill. And it's not like New England's been pretty good against the run.
Yeah.
So again, Tyreek Hill should be able to shine in this matchup. I actually don't think he'll be that chalky. And so we'll talk about that later, but I think that the floor should be there for him to be successful in cash.
Yeah, I think the mediocrity we've seen from him, and I agree, he looked good last week. I think it scared some people off. And I think we saw last week enough that we should be thinking he's primed for a big game, and why not a division rival? So I think that's a great pick there. It seems, and I think you would agree with this. I don't know how much you've done. It seems he's pretty well past this wrist injury, not something fantasy managers need to be concerned with right now.
Yeah, I think we're good on that front. I think it was something he was dealing with a couple of weeks back. And then again, last week he had a really good performance, and I feel like he'll continue. I'm recovering from that over time. And definitely it's always something to track. Like if we get some news, like it flares up in practice or something, then maybe it's worth a pivot, and there are plenty of pivot options around here. But also part of what happened here is I made my lineup and I was like, oh, I have $1,000 left over. Boom,
Yeah.
I can get up to Tyreek
Where are you
Hill.
going to pay up? I like
Okay,
that.
great.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And there were some savings there because of the next players we're going to talk about. This is the bookworm section, easily underestimated because their noses are in the books. But these are the value plays, guys. We're talking $4,000 to $6,000 plays that are going to help round out that lineup. And as Austin mentioned, if you find great plays on this tier, you got a little bit of money to pay up at wide receiver. So Austin, you like a running back and a tight end here.
Yeah, somebody at DraftKings once again did not do their job this week.
Yeah.
Brian Robinson is $5,600 on DraftKings. He is $7,900 on FanDuel. I get that is because Brian Robinson is known for rushing yards and scoring touchdowns, but that is too big of a difference between these two sites, regardless of how the player is utilized. I think this is a smash spot for Brian Robinson on DraftKings. I could see him being incredibly highly rostered, especially because Washington is playing the crumbling Dallas Cowboys, who have allowed the second most points to running back since week 8. They are Dallas is 10.5-point underdogs in this matchup.
Good Lord.
Washington has a 28-point implied team total, which is second on the slate only to the Detroit Lions, who seem to be the best team, definitely in the NFC, if not in the NFL. I'm going to play the running backs. I think Brian Robinson is the cash play. Austin Eckler is the tournament play here. I could also see you playing Brian Robinson in tournaments, frankly, but I just at this price, like to me, it's a free square on in cash, and I think a lot of people will just go that route.
So you're gonna do this to me again. So I am playing Brian Robinson in tournament, as we'll talk about in a few minutes here. But what I found interesting, Austin, because you talked about the prices, and maybe there was a mistake made. I don't think DraftKings would ever own up to this. Robinson and Eckler are the exact same price on DraftKings. They both are 5,600. So maybe someone like fat fingered something and they just didn't fix it, and so that's how we ended up with this. But what I'm saying is, as we're going to talk about at the end of the show, how you beat me last week, you inadvertently, or I talked myself into switching wide receivers on the show, and that cost me and your head-to-head matchup. Now I'm like, oh, do I need to switch to Austin Eckler since they're the exact same price? So you're gonna get me again, Austin, but we'll see how that goes. But tight end, a matchup we've already talked about.
Yes, and it's something I'm coming back to this player. It's Hunter Henry. So I played him a couple of weeks ago in cash. He had a down week that week. That was a bummer. I came back to him last week in tournaments. He did better, which was good. And I'm treating his kind of like season long trend as a thing that's more indicative here. And so did I say his name already? It's Hunter Henry. If I didn't say his name already, I'm going with Hunter Henry. He's been consistently getting targets in this offense. He clearly has a good connection with Drake May. He got back up to, I believe, 9 targets last week, 6 catches. And that's been basically what he's been doing. In 4 of his past 5 games, he's had 6 or more targets. In 3 of those, it was 8 or 9 targets. So that's incredible volume for a tight end that is 4K on DraftKings. And he also has a decent matchup. Miami has allowed the 5th most points to the tight end position over the past 4 weeks. So feels like a smash spot, really easy decision here at tight end. And it's also, again, like it's going to allow me some salary savings. And I'm telling you, when I tell you about my cash lineup so far, you will be surprised and you will be wanting to play Hunter Henry.
Yeah, there you go. I want to bring something up that Austin and I were talking about before the show. When you see rank versus tight end, make sure that team hasn't played Taysom Hill yet, because Austin pointed out how the Browns are now the 2nd worst team against the tight end in fantasy football since the week 8. But they got Taysom Hill, and that's not a typical tight end game. You're not playing Taysom Hill every week. And so just kind of take that with a grain of salt when you see some of these. I think it's the Browns, the Panthers, and the Falcons who he beat up on this year. So when you see those guys pop up somewhere, it's not the Dolphins. So Austin's play makes a lot of sense. And guess what? Miami's probably even worse against the tight end. It's just some weird Taysom Hill games made those games look different. So
yes.
Yeah, keep that in mind. We end the cash section with C's get degrees. These are the punt plays of the week. And Austin, this might be the 2nd time this season you have a non-tight end or defense or somebody here in this section.
Yeah, it's been hard to find these cheap receivers this year, and at the sub 4K range, which has kind of been a bummer. It's really fun to find those guys, if you ask me. That's like one of the joys of DFS.
I noticed when I was doing my rankings today, I think it was the running back position, Austin. They priced everybody at 4K. And then all of a sudden, when you drop into guys that you've never heard of, actually one of which clearly got cut since the slate started, Jakob Johnson, the fullback who doesn't have a job now, and Colson Yankoff from Washington are the only $2,500 plays right now. So everybody else is at least 4K on DraftKings. You couldn't even do this at running back. So at least you found one wide receiver. So.
Okay, we need to talk about the fact that you were scrolling that far down on your DraftKings and FanDuel boards.
I was trying. It was because I was building a weird lineup, and I wanted to see if there was anybody just like super cheap. Now, this is on Football Guys ranking database, so I don't know if this is the actual case on their player pool. But I was like, is there any? Austin, honestly, I might have just had the show on the mind where I was like, is there anybody even below 4K for us to use for the show? But yeah, there are 2 guys according to the player pool right now that are 2,500, and you're not playing either one of them. So.
Yeah, no. Instead, I'm playing Jalen Coker, who I never expected to be fantasy relevant at all this year. But this is a rookie. I think he was a UDFA, if I'm not mistaken, for the Carolina Panthers. Let's see. I'm going to confirm that right now. Yes, he was a UDFA. Kind of wild that he is on the team. He went to Holy Cross. I just learned on the Football Reference page. He's quietly been getting some action in Carolina, especially since Bryce Young returned. In his past 3 games, he went 4 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown, 2 catches for 36 yards, and 3 catches for 41 yards. Notably, last week he had 8 targets. Any player priced below 4K getting 8 targets is really nice. The Panthers are playing the Kansas City Chiefs this week, which is going to be tough for them because that is a tough defense, especially for a bad team. But what that does mean is they will be playing from behind. They will be wanting to push the ball. And I think this connection between Bryce Young and Jalen Coker, you can continue to take advantage of it for a couple more weeks until either Coker gets priced up or we see that this was actually just a flash in the pan. But I think for this week, the salary savings at 3,700, if Coker is able to get 5 targets again and turn that into 3 catches for 40 yards, like that's going to be just fine. And I think that's something that's totally doable against a Kansas City team that will probably be like a score ahead. And
Exactly.
and they might not even be pressing that much on defense, honestly, because I do feel like Kansas City actually has this mentality where they're like, we're here for the playoffs, like we're here to win the Super Bowl. And so like it's kind of like you don't take your starting pitcher 7 innings deep in the regular season when you need them for the World Series or whatever. So I think it's going to be a similar mindset here for Kansas City. They should be able to coast, and Carolina will be trying to play catch up.
I completely agree with everything you're saying. And I'm like, oh yeah, and Travis Kelce's my tournament pick. So this is real interesting. Austin making me hate my lineup. The first time in 12 weeks that you have me hating my lineup before we get into tournament play. And I love the Jalen Coker pick. Jalen Coker is the kind of guy, Austin, who he's dangerous because he is a UDFA. He is playing for his career right now. And he's doing it with a team that, as you mentioned, is not a very good team, but they need to see what they have in Jalen Coker. Is he the next, Cooper Kupp? Is he going to come out of nowhere and just shock the world? He's probably not. But the fact of the matter is they need to see what they have in this kid. So I like picks like that to go off in these weird late weeks, because right now Jalen Coker does not have a job next season as a UDFA. He has to prove that he is worthy of a roster spot next year. I like that pick.
Yeah, exactly. I love those scrappy players too in general. They're always fun to pull for.
Exactly. I forgot to mention at the top of the show, but we don't just talk DFS, we actually play it, and you can play with us. If you check the links in the description of this video and also in Austin's article that's going to drop on Saturday, there are links to play in pools with us on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Over on FanDuel, we just play the main slate, and on DraftKings, we play every slate. So that we have a slate going on right now for Thursday. We have a Monday night slate. Anything you're looking to do, they're $2 contest. It's really for bragging rights, because at the end of this show, we will announce the people who won the main slate contest last week. So if you're looking to play DFS with Austin and myself, check the link in the description of this video for pools on DraftKings and FanDuel. And now we pivot over to tournament play. And for this section, Austin is going to give you enough that you could start an entire Austin lineup if you want, which I highly recommend. He's really good at this. However, remember, Thursday information is tough. Or if you want some alternatives, you can look at my stuff. Sometimes they're better alternatives. Usually they're worse alternatives. Austin, let's get to the quarterback pick, because as I mentioned, I am going to talk Bo Nix. But I'm actually going to talk about some alternative strategies around Bo Nix. But my other option, when I went into the show sheet, I was coming down to 2 guys, and they're so similarly priced, it's ridiculous. And you took the other one, so it worked out perfectly.
Yeah, what's funny is I literally, when I was reading the show sheet and putting my players in, I saw this line that says late swap option to Kyler, Gina, or Purdy, and I didn't even process that when I decided, oh, Kyler Murray is going to be my tournament pick.
I was gonna say, this is the first time where I incorporated a little strategy into my DFS pick here.
So. Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of that. No, so I'm going with Kyler Murray this week. And if you've watched this before, you know that I will often correlate, stack whenever I'm doing this. So you can probably see a little bit of where this lineup is headed in the future. But I like the idea of having an attacking the Arizona-Seattle matchup this week. It's not the highest over-under on the week, but it is up there. It's the 4th highest over-under right now. Yeah. It's at 47.5 points. Arizona is maybe, it's a 1-point spread, and I think technically Seattle is like barely favored because they have the better money line odds, but they have the same exact implied team total, which is also really weird now that I'm looking at this. It's throwing me off.
I pull mine from a different source of truth, and they have it as Arizona being a 1.5 favorite. They have Arizona at 24.5 implied and Seattle at a 23 implied, if that helps you at all. So
okay, that's good. Yeah, I think mine comes from a different sports book than like the standards, which is a little annoying. But whatever.
I actually, just to give them props where it's due, let me go find that page one more time. I actually get it from eatdrinkandsleepfootball.com, not because I have any loyalty to them whatsoever. They put a really clean page together that I found one day and I just stick with it. So it's Eat, Sleep, and Drink Football if you guys ever want to check it out. And I'll actually send you the link right now, Austin, as well. But it's a pretty cool little page, and it makes my life a little bit easier when I'm looking at these implied totals. So just an interesting one out there for people. So
Yeah, and in a minute, after whenever Ryan talks, I'll figure out where mine comes from because I pull my data from NFL Fast R. It's like an R package that
yeah, yeah.
pulls data into different formats really quickly, and I cannot remember the sportsbook they use, but I'll bring it up in a second. Point being, this Arizona Seattle matchup is really intriguing to me. What's really intriguing to me about playing the Arizona side too is they're coming off their bye week, and so what I'm trying to lean into this year a little bit more is betting on teams coming out of bye weeks that they have made some changes in their offense, that maybe we've seen some tweaks. And I will talk about the receiver more later, but I can't help it now. We have seen rookie receivers come out of bye weeks and do really well. And so that if Marvin Harrison is going to do well, Kyler Murray is going to do well as well. And so it's a good matchup. It's a tight spread. It's going to be back and forth. It's decently high scoring. There's just a lot there that makes me want to attack this matchup. And Kyler he's got that rushing upside. He's got the safe floor. There's a lot here that I like about the matchup and the quarterback.
Yeah, and guys, when we get to announcing our lineups at the end of this, I couldn't get Marvin Harrison out of my lineup either, Austin. Like, there's so much to like about that matchup. And what's funny is I almost ended up having a lineup with Harrison and JSN just for a little bring back because I also am just very bought into this lineup in general. No shock. Geno Smith is my stream of the week. There's always some correlation there. I think this is an underestimated matchup this week, and I just have this feeling this is going to be a really fun matchup. And normally when I have that feeling, or when people have that feeling, it's because it's the highest over under. I like that this one isn't, so it could actually surprise people, which seems to happen more often than not. And obviously, I love the Kyler Murray pick. He's just been so good lately, and so has Bo Nix, and that's why I wanted to go with Bo Nix in the tournament. And I did have a feeling he was going to be chalky. Some of the pricing made me feel like there's a chance people aren't going to be completely in on him, not because he's overpriced, but because, as Austin pointed out, everybody's kind of cheap this week. So like Jaden Daniels, the highest priced quarterback, is only $700 more than Bo Nix on DraftKings. Kyler Murray is $800 less, or $100 less than Bo Nix. Baker Mayfield coming off of a bye, $200 less than Bo Nix. There's so many intriguing possibilities out there, Austin. Jared Goff, coming off the best quarterback game not named Taysom Hill, is only $300 more than Bo Nix. I think we could see the chalk shift a little bit, but I do think he's going to be highly priced. Since week 5, he's the number 4 quarterback in fantasy football. The kid has just come on, and you got to pick on the Raiders, plain and simple. Like, what are you doing if you don't? But Austin, as I mentioned, I wanted to incorporate a little strategy into this. Is something you've been talking about with me on the show. And I like to show that I'm listening and getting better at things. The one nice thing about Knicks is it's a 425 start. If your lineup didn't go as well as you wanted it to at 1:00, and you see that there might be a better ceiling or a get different play with Kyler Murray or Geno Smith in that same game, or even Brock Purdy, who has not played very poorly lately, gets Green Bay. You'll have to keep an eye on the weather in that one because it's Green Bay in winter. But these are guys that are all cheaper than Knicks. So you can get different, change your lineup there, and maybe late swap one of the wide receivers to create a different stack as well. So I kind of like the late gameness of Bo Nix. I can see how some of the running backs did in the early game as I'm making my decisions there.
Yeah, I love it. I love having some players in the late swap to give you a little bit of flexibility there. And yeah, I think Bo Nix is worth it. I'm very intrigued by the Denver Las Vegas matchup. You'll see in a minute. I actually have some players from that matchup, and I think there's some ways to attack it. So I like the approach you have going there. And this game honestly could end up hitting the over in a sneaky way, in part because I think Denver, like they've shown they have the ability to put up points.
And they don't want to take their foot off the gas. Like against Atlanta, they didn't sit Bo Nix. They didn't consider, like they just went out. Sorry, I forgot.
Let's just throw out there that Sean Payton was a New Orleans Saint, and so
okay, so maybe he hates
track
Atlanta.
that. Maybe he hates the Falcons, which I get it. I hate the Saints.
There you go. Okay. You know what? So maybe they will take it easy on the Raiders. I doubt it.
I think he has something to prove too. It's part of
Yeah.
Sean Payton is out here like, oh, y'all made fun of me last year and thought I was an awful coach. Let me show you.
And he has something to prove for Bo Nix, because a lot of people were like, it's a Sean Payton pick, but nobody else would have taken him in the first round. And now it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have been very happy with Bo Nix in the first round.
Yes.
Austin, as we move on, we're talking about running backs. And as I mentioned, Austin gives you enough plays to fill a lineup. So Austin's going to be giving you 2 running backs here. One makes perfect sense to me. The other, I'm going to have questions about if you're worried. So let's go ahead and start with the first guy on your list.
Yeah, well, I have already thought ahead on that one. On the
Okay,
one. But the
perfect.
first one is Kenneth Walker, who again, I mentioned that I like this Arizona-Seattle matchup. I think it's going to be an intriguing strategy to attack the running backs on one side of the matchup, and I prefer Kenneth Walker in that side. And so some people may see the tight spread and think, oh, that means there's going to be a ton of passing. So let me get DK Metcalf or JSN in the lineup. And I think it's fine, but honestly, Arizona's actually been pretty good against opposing receivers over the past 4 weeks. They've allowed an average of 25 points per game to the receiver position. It's not a lot for multiple receivers. However, Arizona has been once again awful against running backs. Same as last year. They've allowed almost 30 points per game over the past 4 weeks to the running back position. So what I'm betting on here is it's a tight game, and so it's in neutral game script a lot, which keeps Kenneth Walker involved. He's been involved in the pass game pretty frequently. So there's a lot here that I think Ken Walker can do really well. We've also seen him have multi-touchdown games. So honestly, it wouldn't shock me if Kenneth Walker scored every single one of Seattle's touchdowns, and then Kyler Murray is having to throw the ball, or is choosing to throw the ball down the field to keep up and to get ahead in this game.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And until last week, we saw him much more involved in the passing game. I think he took a step back last week, but they're not afraid to throw him the ball more this year as well. And you love to see that out of Ken Walker, because that was pretty much the only knock on him coming out of college, is that he just didn't catch the ball. So as we move on to your second back, it's Kareem Hunt, everybody. And Austin, the obvious elephant in the room is the return of Isaiah Pacheco, which not everybody knows about. So you do have an alternative there. But my question to you is Hunt, I guess I'll let you break class in case of emergency. Is Hunt not playable if Pacheco's announced in? Is that how you're handling this?
Yeah, essentially. So right now, Kareem Hunt, this is also why I had to put him in here. Kareem Hunt is $5,700 on DraftKings. DraftKings priced him as if Isaiah Pacheco is definitely playing this week. And there's a good chance he does, but he has been a limited participant in practice both Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So we need to see what happens on Friday and if we get some clear reporting. And if not, it could be a game time decision. Because Kareem Hunt is $5,700, that means he is $100 more than both Washington football team running backs. So if you do find out, oh, well, Kareem Hunt's not playing, Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler are right there to help you out. There's 3 really cheap running backs that don't have to do a ton to pay off their salary and give you a lot of flexibility elsewhere.
No, it makes perfect sense. And like you said, the prices are there, with Kareem Hunt just being $100 both more than both Washington running backs. So yeah, it's such an interesting point that they priced him as if Pacheco was back, and they did that so early in the week. And I'm just now starting to feel comfortable that Pacheco's back. I'm the guy who's been saying I don't think he comes back this season. And if I were betting right now, I'd still bet that he doesn't play this week. Austin, you mentioned they're playing for the playoffs. Why are you bringing Isaiah Pacheco back against the Carolina Panthers?
Yeah,
unnecessary.
I think that's a very good point. Like, that's part of why I'm like a little bit like, oh, maybe Kareem Hunt
It
gets
feels like
another
the
run.
Jonathan Brooks situation, where like they're just gonna keep being like, we're bringing him back soon. Yeah. Like I said, I just don't know why they would bring him back this week. Jonathan Brooks, who will be making his debut against the Chiefs, at least so we're told at this point. Austin, I'm going with a rookie running back who stole my heart at the draft and out of nowhere starts playing very, very well about 5 weeks ago. And that is Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy, it took a concussion for him to win the job, but since he won the job in week 9, This man, if you don't count his bye week last week, so weeks 5 through 10, Tyrone Tracy is the number 9 running back in fantasy. In that span, he has 4 of 6 games above 10 fantasy points, and the other one is 6.9. So it's not like the worst matchup in the world. He did have one dud in there. But regardless, they seem to be using him in Austin. They're obviously making a change at quarterback this week. They're going with Tommy DeVito. And I think with this new quarterback stepping in, and he's not a rookie, but he's still very new to the NFL, they're going to likely want to lean on their running game right now. And Tampa Bay, again, people giving respect where it's not necessarily due anymore. Tampa Bay was great against running backs last year. They are terrible against running backs this season. And I think Tyrone Tracy, who is a threat to catch the ball out of the backfield, could do some special things for a quarterback who may be looking for the safe options this week.
Yeah, no, I'm totally fine with that. I think it's actually a really good strategy too, because I was looking at this matchup and I was intrigued by it because I was like, the Tampa Bay side seems really compelling. Who would I even correlate with on the other side? Like I tried to do a little bit of digging on like what did Wandale Robinson look like
Yeah.
when Tommy DeVito was under center? He was fine. But what's the connection like going to be with Malik Neighbors? I don't know. So people might look at this and they just might stay away completely, which I think it presents the opportunity to pivot to a guy like Tyrone Tracy, who could just end up getting, I mean, if he gets 15 touches at this price and gets in the end zone, like that's probably enough for him to pay off his salary. And especially in like a smaller field tournament, which I tend to lean towards, that could really work out well and help you shoot up the board.
Yep. As we move over to the wide receivers, Austin, you start off with a guy who I had to get into my lineup because I agree with you. It's coming off the bye. It's the perfect schedule. I'm really interested to see what Marvin Harrison looks like down the stretch.
Yes, I am too. And Seattle has been the worst team against opposing receivers over the past several weeks. They've allowed 44.5 points per game over there since week 8 to the receiver position. Again, it's going to be a tight matchup. I do think that Arizona will want to throw the ball. I think Marvin Harrison, he's just too good to like continue to be in the doldrums of 3 or 4 catch games.
Yeah.
And I remember with Justin Jefferson, when he came out, like he kind of did the same thing his rookie year, where it was kind of like meh for a while, to the point where I drafted him in a redraft league that had keepers. I dropped him. And then, which could you imagine telling somebody you dropped Justin Jefferson? Which, yeah, one of my many mistakes. But then,
I mean, there's a reason we always say have patience with these rookies. There's more stories out there than just yours. So.
Exactly. But then he had one good performance. And I was like, oh, shoot, I messed up. So I put a bunch of fab on him, got him back on my roster. Thankfully, he still lives on my roster to this day. That could happen with Marvin Harrison. Like if you have been worried about him, like he could come out of the bye week and just kill it down the stretch. And I think that's a very feasible outcome for the rest of the year. Also, Arizona is competing for the NFC West. Like this like could genuinely determine who wins the NFC West.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, it could be very important in playoff implications down the stretch because everybody's so close that the tiebreaker is going to matter. So they're going to be relying on their best players. And I'm sure for the past 2 weeks, they've been trying to figure out, how do we unlock Marvin Harrison? We just spent a ton of draft capital on him. We want to build the offense around him. He's a generational talent. Let's get it going. And this is going to be a great matchup for them to get it sorted out.
Well, I remember I was looking at their schedule before their bye, and I thought the Jets were going to be his last tough game for the entire season. He scored a touchdown, if I remember correctly. So,
yeah, he did.
Yeah, things are looking up for Harrison, and I love the pick a lot. Your next guy worries me. And Austin, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I fell victim to the red numbers. I had a lineup for tonight's show with Jacoby Myers, and I saw the matchup and I got a little nervous, and I wanted the Bo Nix correlation, the comeback correlation. I couldn't do it, Austin. I was like, do I try to fit Brock Bowers in here? Do I build an old Kelly 2 tight end set? I ended up just staying away from the Raiders altogether, but try to convince me on Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, so the red numbers aren't good, and even if you look at the past 4 weeks, I mean they're better. Like the Denver Broncos have allowed the 17th most points to receivers, which is very mid over the past 4 weeks. Here's really what I was thinking. So Jacoby Myers, he's $5,100 on DraftKings. I was thinking about the game that we saw a couple of weeks ago whenever the Broncos played the Kansas City Chiefs. And that matchup, we would have thought like, oh, the receivers aren't going to do super well in this game. But it's one of those deals where I feel like Pat Surtain, like he tends to be the part of the reason that opposing receivers are so stymied in these matchups. And oftentimes I feel like I feel like we pay so much attention to that we think, oh, whoever the number one receiver is, that's going to be the person that gets the coverage from Pat Surtain. But sometimes I think he just goes against the best player, and that doesn't always work out. Like when they played Kansas City, like Travis Kelce still got 12 targets, so I think it's totally fine to go the Brock Bowers route. But DeAndre Hopkins was able to still get 4 catches on 56 yards. The only reason that I think there wasn't more is like there was a weird game. Mahomes threw an interception. There was like a couple of turnovers. So what I'm really betting on is that they're going to say, you know what, we got to cover the biggest weapon in Vegas, which is going to be Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to help open up Jacoby Myers. I also just think too, like this team has got so much passing volume that Jacoby Myers can still get there on volume. And, maybe he scores a touchdown, but I feel like I like buying in sort of off scenarios of saying like, you know what, like nobody's going to want to play Jacoby Myers. I think it's an interesting time to play him. And the volume has just continued to be there.
It's a good point because I literally had him in my lineup and went back and changed the entire lineup. So you're right. He is kind of a player that no one's going to be real interested in. And it's also an interesting point about Brock Bowers. I mean, as his price starts to climb up, he's still not he's not like Kelsey heyday expensive, but at some point, someone's going to be like, we can't let this kid beat us. And this seems like an opportune week that you have one of the best corners in the NFL. Bowers is basically a receiver. Take him away. Make Jacoby Myers beat you. You're going to feel a lot better if Jacoby Myers beats you than if you just continue to get beat up on by Brock Bowers.
Exactly. Oh, and we should also point out, like these teams have already played each other once this season, and in that matchup, Brock Bowers did just fine, and so did Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers had 6 catches on 9 targets for 72 yards. That's like 15. That's 15 DraftKings points. That's paying off a salary right there. That's 3xing it without even getting in the end zone. So he's done it before against this team. He can do it again. And honestly, Brock Bowers could get there too. So to your conundrum, I could see like definitely correlating on the Vegas Raiders side and feeling comfortable with it. And I think it's a good way to get different.
Now that was my initial plan. So if it hits, I'm going to take credit for it as well. Austin, you're going to try to decode this Green Bay Packers wide receiver room. Good luck to you, my friend.
Yes. Well, the point. So I'm going to decode it, but I'm going to tell you.
You just need savings.
Well, there's that too, and then I'm going to tell you that you needed to try and decode it as well. Whoever the you is that's listening to this, I think it's just a good week to bet on one of the Green Bay Packers players. I think you can go. With the receivers in particular, I think you can go many different directions. I think Jaden Reed is a compelling option. I was a little bit like flirting with Dontavian Wicks, but I decided to go back to Romeo Doubs, who has had a couple of down games here recently, but he's had stretches of the season where he was the most targeted receiver in the Green Bay Packers offense. He has been commonly a red zone threat for the Green Bay Packers. Also, I think the matchup is decent this week. They're playing the San Francisco 49ers, who have been like kind of hit or miss on defense. But this game is going to be tight. It's a 3-point spread, 46.5 point over under. So I think there's going to be times in this game where they need to pass the ball a lot. And I'm hoping that I'm betting on Green Bay getting back to relying on Romeo Doubs when he is $4,600. It is salary savings, but it's salary savings with the guy that we've seen be the number one receiver on this offense. We've seen him have multi-touchdown games. And so I'm going to play into that for this week because that's going to allow me to pay up for my next receiver, which we already talked about, is Tyreek Hill. Because honestly, I can't read where his roster percentage is going to be this week. I feel comfortable playing him in cash, but I don't know if he's going to be chalky in cash. I don't have a good read on it because of the New England of it all that he's going up against. And so I do think he's also a really interesting tournament play because I think I could see him easily going overlooked because people think like, Miami's just going to run away with this. It's going to be Devon Achane. But New England has been quietly good against running backs. Again, another team that has been not good against receivers, but really good against running backs. New England has allowed under 16 fantasy points per game to the running back position since week 8. Wow. That's not good. And so it's good just run through Tyreek Hill. So I'm betting on him in those tournament settings as well.
And they've been giving him carries lately. Like, so if you do think it's a running back game, maybe Tyreek's the running back in the first quarter.
There you go.
Austin, as we move on to my wide receivers, if you're starting Bo Nix, you should probably stack him with Cortland Sutton. I do want to throw out Vegas, also very bad against the tight end. If you believe Adam Troutman is developing into that guy, that's not the worst stack either. And Austin, one weird thing I've noticed in the NFL over the last few years, why are the teams with the elite tight ends the worst against the tight end? Like Brock Bowers, but the Raiders can't cover the tight ends. Mark Andrews, but the Ravens can't cover the tight end. Travis Kelce, but the Chiefs can't cover the tight end. Like, what is, like, do you just give up in practice? And so you're so bad. I don't understand if they're just beat down or what's going on with that. But Austin, on top of the Cortland Sutton stack, I think Calvin Ridley is a great play this week as well. And I'm looking at the fact that Ridley has really come on since DeAndre Hopkins left the team. Believe it or not, over the last 3 games. Oh, I only have week 10 in here. So let me make sure I get my stats right. I want to get week 11 involved before I throw something out here. Okay. Well, from week 8 to week 10, he was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy. And I got really excited for a second, but he did have a bit of a dud in week 11. So he is now the wide receiver 9 over his last 4 games. But more importantly, he's just heavily targeted. Nick Westbrook-Akine is starting to score these like weird random touchdowns, but Calvin Ridley's had a 2 touchdown game in that stretch. And then when you look at what Houston has allowed to wide receiver 1s. And this is one, Austin, where I feel really comfortable saying this because Dallas is terrible. But CeeDee Lamb just went for 8 for 93. And obviously Lamb much better than Ridley. But guess what? Will Levis is probably better than Cooper Rush. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6 for 60 and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson, 9 for 90 and 2 touchdowns. Josh Downs, 4 for 109 and a touchdown. Romeo Doubs, 8 for 94. Like, wide receiver 1s are feasting against Houston over the last month or so. And Calvin Ridley is the wide receiver 1 and 2. He literally has just been commanding an insane target share. And on top of that, still finding the end zone, just not with the frequency of Nick Westbrook-Akine.
Yeah, so I listened to some of that because I was babysitting my dog. But
you're fine.
I did catch that you're talking about Calvin Ridley.
Yes.
And you'll be sad to know that I did consider him for cash, but I think because of that, he's still a good pick because I think to your point, like it could be a really good spot for him. And I tend to overlook the Titans. I think other people do it. So he may not be actually that steamed up.
Well, and what I like about that is you looked at him at cash, which means he's probably a safe play. But we've seen this like 2 touchdown potential from him. If I remember correctly, he scored 3 earlier in the season. But regardless, we've seen multi-touchdown game potential from him. So that makes him a decent tournament play as well. Because if you find the multi-touchdown games, things work out really, really well for you. So that's going to wrap up the wide receivers. Austin, we're going to move on to the tight ends. I am going to remind everybody at the end of this segment, Austin and I are going to create 2 rosters on DraftKings scoring where we're going to actually battle it out. We'll talk about what happened last week. But remember, if you guys actually want to play against us in the main slate, check out the links in the description of this video, and you have options to play with us on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Austin, let's talk tight ends. And I think your guy is a perfect tournament play because, man, did he burn some people last week.
Yeah. This is all vibes. It's literally,
there's no stats to back this up.
No. Get 8 targets 2 weeks ago, and I was like, that's my guy. It's TJ Hawkinson, who is $4,200 on DraftKings. The price is just too good. And I don't know. I think it's going to happen. I feel good about him. It's going to happen sometime. Like he's looked good at coming off the injury. And I do worry about the Sam Darnold of it all, but I also trust the Kevin O'Connell of it all. And I'm going to bet that, the last game that Sam Darnold had where he started to kind of fumble the bag a bit is the outlier, and that they get the train back on the tracks this week, and TJ Hawkinson helps him get there.
After hearing you talk about Travis Kelce, or rather the Chiefs earlier in the show, I don't feel great about my Travis Kelce pick. For the me and you tournament, I'm going to leave it, but I can tell you right now I'm changing it for my Milli maker and for my other lineups I'm building this week. Austin, I am so tempted by the rookie tight ends this week. I have Travis Kelce as my pick, guys. I'll mention him briefly here in a moment, but Theo Johnson and Jatavian Sanders are the most interesting people to me in the entire slate. Like, I'm talking the entire slate. Sanders scored a touchdown on like 2 targets against the Giants before they went on bye. Theo Johnson had like 5 catches in that game. They're both taking on teams that are not great against the tight end. Tampa Bay is not great against anything. They just don't play defense, and the Giants should have to throw. But my obvious concern with Theo Johnson is Cutlets. Tommy Cutlets. Regardless, I don't trust this kid. I don't trust them coming in here and throwing the ball. I love Theo Johnson, but I'm like, man, he was vibing with Daniel Jones, and now I don't know. Jatavian Sanders, it's the Chiefs. And I'm like, I know they're bad against the tight end, but like Jatavian Sanders has looked pretty damn good. He scored a touchdown. It wasn't a lot of volume. They don't really have a great wide receiver core, and the Chiefs can't stop the tight end. So I will tell you right now, in my lineups that I'm building for GPP, it's probably going to be a lot of Theo Johnson and Jatavian Sanders, and I'm just going to go down with that ship, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, I actually looked at Jatavian Sanders also. I was considering him as a tournament pick, and frankly, I also was like, oh, Theo Johnson, interesting. So those are both picks that I think are interesting and worth checking out in tournament settings. So I'm with it. And Travis Kelce, I think he could cook against Carolina because Carolina's that bad, but I could also see them just running the ball a ton. So, but because of that, we've talked about this many times. When you think the game script is going to go, it's obviously they're running the ball a ton. That's a great time to pivot in some of your lineups and say, what if they don't? And what if they do pass the ball 20 times to Travis Kelce? Like, that's also possible. So I can also tell the story that Travis Kelce pops.
And I did go in, folks, and make sure the Taysom Hill game, and he did have a game against them, 16 fantasy points in week 9. However, Theo Johnson, 4 for 37. This is against Carolina. This is me now talking about Travis Kelce, my actual pick. But this is the Adam Troutman, 4 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown, and actually a backup tight end scored a touchdown in that game as well. And guess what? Zach Ertz and his backup both scored touchdowns against them. They're giving up Kyle Pitts, 3 for 70 yards. Cole Kmet, 3 for 57 yards. This is going all the way back to week 5. They're giving up points to the tight end. But Austin hits a nail on the head here. You have to believe that Kelce's either going to feast in the first half or Carolina's going to somehow keep this game close. And that's kind of what you're hoping for there. And then obviously, Austin, much like with TJ Hawkinson, this is a vibe check because Travis Kelce didn't even score one singular PPR fantasy point last week. He finished the week at 0.8, I think it was. So it's just no bueno unless this switch. This switched to standard, the little scoring thing I'm looking at for Kelce. But he is the tight end 2 over the last 4 weeks, but he scored 2.8 fantasy points last week. Just awful. So I thought my original thought process, Austin, was what he did last week is going to scare people off of him this week. They're not going to want to pay up is kind of where I went with that.
Oh yeah, I definitely think there's something there, and I'm continuing to buy into this offense, even though everybody wants to hate on it.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like at this point everybody just wants to hate on the Chiefs. That's just kind of how it goes. So we'll see how it goes. And now that we're done with the offenses, we can't do a lineup without defenses. And Austin, I love your pick on DraftKings. And full disclosure, Austin did not have FanDuel pricing available to him. I'm going to get it up here while he talks about the Detroit Lions because, man, are they overpriced on FanDuel. So.
Yeah, the Detroit Lions are 3,700. And honestly, like, I was out here thinking, maybe I try and go cheap at defense this week, but the matchup is just so good. They're playing Anthony Richardson, and we know that he has been known to make some mistakes as rookies do, and I am considering him still a rookie because he hasn't played a full season of NFL games. So it's totally natural that he would throw some interceptions, cause some fumbles, and I think that the Lions are disruptive of enough of a defense to potentially make that happen. They can get some pick sixes. Their special teams game has been really good this year. We're getting down bad when we're talking about special teams on a DFS show. So I just love this defense all around, and I think I'm willing to pay up. I wonder if they'll be chalky or not. This is another situation where I can't tell. Like, sometimes I have a good gauge of it. I don't know though with the Lions. I could see them going under rostered because people don't like to pay up for defense, but it's also a weird week where there's not as many expensive options elsewhere, so it enables you to pay up at defense. So they may be actually a little chalky, but it's chalk that I want to bite because I think they have the best chance of scoring 10 to 20 points on the slate of any of the defenses.
Yeah, I'm actually wrong. FanDuel, they're my second favorite defense. It's DraftKings, and it's only because of their price ranking. So this would be a good time to explain to you guys. I'm actually really good at defense, guys. This is something I do well in fantasy football. So, Austin, this would be a good time to explain my process when ranking fantasy defenses for FanDuel and DraftKings for DFS. I literally go immediately to the bottom of the list, and I work my way up, starting with the teams that I'm willing to play at these lower salaries. And so on FanDuel did a great job with pricing this week, is what it really comes down to. So everybody I like on FanDuel is 3,900 or above. On DraftKings, I feel like they made some mistakes with pricing. And so that's why I like some other teams over on DraftKings. But one thing that FanDuel has been doing, I've been complaining about this for weeks now, Austin. They have another defense, the Denver Broncos, above 5,000, 5,100. This is like 5 consecutive weeks now that they are pricing the top defense $100 above what used to be like their cap at 5,000, and the Commanders are 5,000 this week. So like I said, FanDuel actually did excellent with their defense pricing this week. DraftKings, I felt like there were some holes on their pricing, and that's kind of led me to my pick. The Bears are actually my number one defense on FanDuel, but the Bears are not my number one defense on DraftKings because Denver and Washington are not the highest priced defenses, and they're actually a little bit more affordably priced. So Chicago is my number 3. So I'm going with the Bears as my defense this week because while Minnesota does have Justin Jefferson, they are still giving up a lot of points to fantasy defenses. In fact, I think it's over the last like 5 weeks, they're averaging 10 points allowed to defenses right now. Like they're giving up sacks, they're turning the ball over, and Chicago's been playing very well on defense as they've kind of gotten their footing under them. And if the offense continues to look better, we don't have to worry about Caleb Williams constantly putting the defense into bad positions. So I think this is going to be even better. And it's a division matchup. It's outdoors. There's a lot of reasons to like this. And if I remember correctly, it's one of, if not the lowest, it's not the lowest, but it's one of the lower implied totals of the week, or even the over under. It's only 39.5 points. As you mentioned, the joke of a Cleveland Browns Pittsburgh game is 36.5. So this is only projected to be a field goal higher than that. This feels like an old school NFC North like kind of battle, and that tends to play well for fantasy defenses, and the Bears are one of the cheapest on the slate this week.
Yeah, I think it's a good play, especially the contrarian nature of it, because to your point, the Broncos, they're only 3,200, and like I said, there's not a ton of expensive players elsewhere on the slate. So Broncos are going to be in my cash lineup right now because of the matchup against the Raiders.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, and they're going to be in a lot of people like cash lineups. Just pin the Broncos there. It's definitely the right pick. All right, folks, that is going to wrap up the show. But before we get out of here, we do what we like to call the valedictorian shootout. That is me and Austin going head to head. I started off with a great lead this season, and I am slowly but surely giving it back. Last week, 97.7 points for me. Austin scores 113.4. You might say these are very low scores. Well, yes, they are, because they are Thursday scores. Me and Austin announce a lineup on this show, and that is our lineup for this show. It's not what we're playing against you, though sometimes I get lazy and it is what we're playing against you. But Austin doesn't, and he sets way better lineups on Sunday. Austin, I did notice that you started Juwan Jennings, and I didn't. Juwan Jennings scored like 25.4 fantasy points. You beat me by 16. If I had left Jennings instead of Pearsall, we'd be talking about my comeback victory. But instead, you are now 5-6, about to draw this thing to 500. Austin, my lineup is a bunch of players. One player of my entire lineup did not get discussed on the show. And it might be the first time in a long time you haven't found a way to talk about a Colts wide receiver on this show. So I am going to go Bo Nix, Tyrone Tracy, and Brian Robinson. My pivot, Austin, I was about to do it. I'm not going to, was going to be to pivot to Austin Eckler because they're the same price. And you said he's a better tournament play, but I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to stick with Brian Robinson. My thought process here is, as we've already talked about, the Cowboys are terrible. They get beat up on the ground. This feels like a Brian Robinson 2-touchdown game. Since I'm going Knicks, I'm stacking Sutton, and then I have Ridley. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. And then for my fourth wide receiver, I was debating on what's going to happen here. We've seen good Josh Downs. They being the Colts should have to throw the ball a ton against Detroit. Josh Downs fit perfectly into my lineup. No savings. It's like he was just staring me in the face. It was the last player I added to my lineup. So I'm going Josh Downs with my Travis Kelce build and then the Chicago Bears defense.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. I mean, we have a little bit of overlap per usual. I have Bo Nix as my quarterback at 6,300. I have 3 running backs this week, and you're going to ask how I did this, and we'll get to it. I have Joe Mixon at 8K. I have Brian Robinson as well at 5,600, and I have Christian McCaffrey at 8,500, which love being able to get both him and Joe Mixon in my lineup.
Yeah, that's filthy.
I did that by playing 3 receivers, one of which is Tyreek Hill. Yes, I was able to get Tyreek Hill as well.
Oh no, you had to go all the way to Tyreek Hill.
But then I have Jalen Coker at 3,700, Kayshon Boutte at 3,500, and then my tight end is Hunter Henry at 4K, and then I was still able to pay it for the Broncos defense at 3,200.
What an interesting lineup. You got the Miami New England game well represented there. So this will be an interesting one, playing on a little game theory for our little head-to-head here. So
yeah, gotta keep chipping away at your lead, make a comeback. So gotta get a little creative.
This will be the first time I think I like my lineup better, mainly because I don't have Jalen Coker in my. No, I'm joking. And folks, as a reminder, you can play with us. Check the links in the description of this video. Last week, I think this is the first time, in fact, I know it is, that we've said this gentleman's name on the show, because I think he took down or lady, I don't know, but it's R. Blanier, second win all time, Austin. But this is only his 5th contest on DraftKings with us. So 2 wins in 5 contests, 169.08 he scored. And then Math is golden with his second win of the season. I believe it is his second win in 3 weeks with 138.28 over there on FanDuel. Folks, if you want to hear your name at the end of the show, jump into those contests. Take them down. Austin, before we get out of here, let everybody know what kind of DFS work you do here at Club Fantasy and where they can find it.
Yeah, so you can catch me 3 times a week. First on Thursday nights for the Thursday Showdown Slate show that I do with Josh Hudson, where we talk about weird bad games like Pittsburgh versus Cleveland that has 16 total points in it scored so far. I'm here every Friday for the DFS Academy, where we talk the main slate, cash, and tournaments. And then my most up-to-date, most current content will always be dropping on Saturday with the A-list. That's where I talk my DFS cash lineups. I give you enough players that you could set a lineup using all of my picks in that article. I do not do that for the cash portion of this show, so check it out for other players to play in your cash lineups there.
There you go. So as I mentioned, guys, that article drops on Saturday. That's going to be the most up-to-date information. Also on Saturday, if you are looking for redraft information, that'll be the next time we are live with Start, Sit, Different Day. We go live every single Saturday at 11 a.m. No show sheet, no agenda. All we do is answer your questions for an hour. I'm making my not-so-triumphant return. Josh asked if I could cover this Saturday, so it'll actually be my face that you're seeing there tomorrow. And then if you still have lineup questions on Sunday, we start a Twitter thread every single Sunday morning where you guys drop lineup questions with all the Club Fantasy writers tagged, and we jump in and we do our best to answer those questions for you, give you some great lineup advice. We're here to help you guys win championships. If you have not hit like and subscribe and all the things you're supposed to do on YouTube, Club Fantasy does shows 6 days a week. 5 of those days we are live. We only take Sundays off, and that is just so we can get all this information that we give to you. Hit the subscribe button. That way you get a notification every single time we go live. You get all this great information for all that free money that you're not going to have to pay us. So check it out. Hopefully we can help you win something on DFS. That is going to be the end of this show. We will see you guys back for week 13. Good luck with those DFS lineups.